Okay, yeah, typically as a hardware vendor, you know, when we come to these kind of events, we want to showcase all the different platforms that we have. And so when I actually put together the abstract for the presentation, these guys said, no, you're not going to do that. See, what we should focus on is what your contributions are for Stratum. So that's exactly what we're going to do, and that's why this is going to be a software-led presentation. So I just wanted to actually go back to something that Guru said this morning, and that is really, this is the time for participation. And as the team, as our team is actually contributing now, it's very clear there's a whole body of work that still needs to be addressed. And so we encourage active participation from everybody to actually make this whole initiative successful, because we believe in it and we think that it will transform this industry. So thank you. So really I only have one slide, and it's our overview of our own software networking roadmap. We do actually have a roadmap in software as Delta. Delta historically, just to briefly introduce us, has been an ODM provider to all the tier 1 networking companies for the last 25 years. Had a lot of success there. We recognized the Whitebox transformation a few years ago, and so we've invested resources, building a US team to actually focus on what we call the disaggregated model, where we're taking third-party NOSes. Some of the names are included in the slide here, on top of our hardware. And this actually model is actually very popular to our customer bases today, because they hear and they understand and they like the promise of SDN, but like everybody here, we know that it's still cooking, right? We're not quite there yet, and so they want to know how do we actually transition? How do we have a transition plan to actually get there? So we've enabled these technologies and more to provide our customers this type of the infrastructure to get them to the next level. And so we, from an SDN perspective, our whole approach is to basically leverage the focus that's described in ONF and the Linux Foundation, and they're obviously very joined at the hip. And the two key technologies that we've identified from our customer bases and our research are basically Sonic and Stratum to actually deliver the actual open source SDN solution to the market. Ironically, I was very happy to see that Sonic is actually also appearing in the previous presentations. So I think we can see from different angles we're getting some level of convergence on terms of what are the sort of the best candidates for success as we try and enable this open source transition. So, but what we're also hearing is that somebody's got to basically support the software features that are delivered to any customer. So we will be focusing on how to actually develop a certification capability, not maybe through us or through critical partners that we have, so that whenever we take a cut of like Stratum, for example, that's baked and proven and qualified on our platforms and in the customer use cases as necessary. So that's basically going to the direction we're following. There's many other activities that are going on in the industry, but we actually are, like anybody, we have a finite number of resources and we have to focus, and this is actually representing our focus today. So really that's, in the interest of time, that's all I wanted to say. If you want to understand more about what value we can bring to the table, then we actually have a booth 11, just through the door, just the second one on the right, and so we can actually introduce you to product lines, et cetera, but we're not going to cover that today. So what I'm going to do now is quickly hand over to the software engineers, Tiffany and Krishna, who are actually going to walk through going to break down what Brian has presented and Antonin have presented at the Stratum level, and to illustrate what the contributions that we've been making, and also to expose what the work that still needs to be done. So at this point, I'll hand over to Tiffany. Thank you.
Okay. So this is the architecture diagram of Stratum, and my focus here today is the orange box in the middle, the platform manager. So the platform manager, sometimes we call it Phal, is a component in Stratum that manage platform peripherals, such as SFP, QSFP, fan, LED, power supply, and so on. So in the Stratum code base, there is a class, an abstract class called Phal interface. So it defines interface for Phal. So mainly it defines the functionality the platform manager will provide to the rest of the Stratum component. So the platform manager use ONLP API to implement platform functionality. The version we use is ONLP v2. In terms of code contribution, Google provide the initial code. And then the community, mainly Delta and Inventec, provide additional implementation of the platform functionality. So this is the Phal interface class. As you can see, there are a few functions defined here. And what I'm going to talk a little bit more is the register transceiver event writer function and the get from panel port info function. The register transceiver event writer function allowed other component in Stratum to subscribe event from the platform manager, subscribe platform event. So this function specifically allow the caller to subscribe transceiver event, so mainly the SFP event. The get from panel port info allow the caller to retrieve SFP detail information, the port information. So this is a architectural diagram focused more on the platform manager. So in the middle, the darker blue box, that's the platform manager. And as you can see, there are a few subcomponents. The ONLP Phal is a class that implements the Phal interface function. So mainly this class provides implementation to the functions we saw on the previous slide. So this is a layer that sits between rest of the platform component and the layer above it. The event handler is a module that provides event notification. So mainly notification of any ONLP device status changes. So as of today, it only handles SFP events. There are a few data sources in Platform Manager. As you can see here, we have SFP data source, fan, LED, power supply, and so on. So each data source right now mapped to one type of ONLP device. So the data sources are mainly manage one or more system attribute, and they are responsible for providing system and hardware information to the rest of the platform manager component. And they did that through this layer, ONLP API wrapper layer. So this is a wrapper layer sit on top of the ONLP API. So this wrapper layer makes the call to the ONLP API, and it hides all the ONLP specific detail from the rest of the Stratum component. Now in the platform manager, there is a database. We call it PHALDB, or attribute database. It is a database that stores system and hardware attributes. So the adapter is a component that defines our facing interface to the PHALDB. So in order to access data from the database, you go through the adapter. The ONLP configurator is a component understand the ONLP specific detail. So this component is responsible for creating initialized data sources, as well as populate the Phal database. Okay, now let's take a look at an example, a sample workflow to understand how Platform Manager provides event notification. And here we're going to focus on SFP event notification. So at the beginning, during initialization time, the ONLP Phal initialize the event handler and also register callback. So it provides callback function for event handler to call later on. Next, all the component in Stratum who are interested in platform event can subscribe event. So here, for example, the chassis manager that is interested in SFP event will call the register transceiver event writer function to subscribe SFP event. After that, the event handler start to do periodical polling to retrieve SFP status from ONLP through this ONLP API wrapper layer. So when a SFP, QSFP just plug in, the ONLP event handler detects that an SFP just plug in through polling. So once event handler detect SFP just plug in, the event handler will invoke the callback function that provided by ONLP Phal earlier. And in that callback function, ONLP Phal will publish the event and to notify all the subscribers that a new SFP just plugged in. So the subscribers, once they got the notification, they will start process the event. So for chassis manager here, for example, it's find out that SFP just plugged in, so it will start maybe the port bring up process. And during that process, the chassis manager might need additional information about the SFP. So it will make a call to get from panel port info to get additional information about that SFP. So this is a brief introduction about mainly the platform manager architecture. And once we understand the basic architecture, the community can help to implement additional features. So up next, my colleague Krishna is going to talk about the community contribution and our demo.
Hi. So far we talked about Phal event notification and the platform manager, different components in the Phal. So I'll talk about what is the current status of the Stratum, what is implemented and what's not implemented, and where we need help. So we got a lot of help from Google's code with Phal interface, event handler, data source, attribute database, and the wrapper classes. We implemented the ONL, we used the Phal classes, and we implemented ONL Phal like my colleague has talked about, right? So we implemented register transceiver event, front panel port information, and Phal initialization. We need additional support for implementing mainly the fan, LED, and PSU thermal data sources, because that is the main part of the platform area that is currently missing in Stratum. So I think once we understand the basic Stratum architecture, I think it will be easier to implement all the different data sources. And also we need help with the adapter and the ONLP configurator, so that currently the way we're doing is like we are adding manually the fan and data sources implementation. With the ONLP configurator and adapter, it will be more dynamic, like pulling the configuration from the ONLP as it is loaded. So we are looking at the community help for the contribution here. So as I mentioned, so we need the implementation of the data sources like the PSU, LED, fan, and thermal sensors, and the Phal DB, adapter, and configurator implementations. At the same time, we are mostly dependent on ONLP, so we also need a wrapper layer at the ONLP API layer, so that we can actually access the hardware resources from the ONLP. And we are right now work is in progress to build ONLP, because we are dependent. ONLP is an external library, so we need help to build ONLP along with Stratum, so that we can load it onto the switch and we can make everything work together. These are some of just a screenshot of what Delta has contributed and what we talked about. And I will just go over basic overview of what we actually did for the demo that is in our booth. So I'll talk about what are the steps that we followed to bring up Stratum on our box. So initially we started working with developing ONLP V2 for our hardware, which is AG9064 V1. It's a barefoot box. And then we installed ONL and also built the SDE and basically installed it on Barefoot's SDE and installed it on the platform. And once after that's done, we compiled the Stratum binary with the implementation that's been done as talked in the previous slides. And then we tested the Stratum with ONOS controller in a fabric topology. So you can see this whole topology and the fabric before in our booth. So this is a basic screenshot of how it looks in our booth. And I don't have a pointer, but the AG9064BF is the barefoot platform running Stratum. And it uses the P4 runtime as mentioned is the basic northbound interface for Stratum. Please come to see the live demo. And if you have any questions, we all three are here to answer.
Thank you, David, Tiffany, Krishna. We have a little bit of time for a few questions, if there are any questions from the audience. Okay, I'll ask a question then. You're not off the hook yet. As an ODM, sort of participating, software developers participating in the project, what's sort of some of the lessons that you've learned about kind of this mode of operation, and have there been significant challenges that you've had to overcome, and would you? So part one, what have you learned, and part two, is there some advice you could give to other community members that are thinking about, how do I approach the code base? How do I get started?
You want to take the question? Okay, I'll just talk about what my experience has been. It's been a little bit, it's not easy to start working on a new code base with a minimal documentation. And it took a while to understand, to go through the code. I think that's kind of common anywhere you see. Like, if you are starting a new, if you're starting as a new developer in any software project, mostly you will not find any documentation. So you just read the code and understand. And once we understood the code and the architecture, I think it was easy for me to do whatever is required for, especially in the platform area. I don't know, Tiffany, if you want to.
So I think I agree with Krishna. Probably our challenge is the documentation. If we can provide more documentation, and then maybe easier for the community to start working on it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, question.
So my question is related to for the vendors who already have their other Linux running on their platform. So where do they actually bring in their OS events to give it to your Phal?
So you're talking about other Linux is like other than ONL? Or?
Yeah, other than ONL.
Okay.
Let's say the vendors who already have their they have their platform based on some other OS,
okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So right now Spectrum seems to be concentrating on the ONL, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, Stratum. So what's the story for the platforms?
So when Tiffany started, she talked about Phal, right? So right now we implemented ONL Phal, which is an implementation. So Phal itself is a abstract concept. So what we did was an implementation of the Phal interface. But if you have your own specific interface or different Linux that you want to use, you can start. You need to implement your own hardware abstraction layer, but the basic necessary what you call is like the HAL layer functions are already there. You just need to implement your own. It comes in a different path. Like you need to implement your own hardware abstraction layer.